Zebulun, Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command thee.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hello, this is John Towers. Welcome to the Abracast. Thank you for tuning in. We're continuing our trip through Exodus here, using primarily the Bible and Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews. So before we get started, Before we get started, I'd like to ask you guys to check out Abracast.com, check out the storefront. I recently uploaded, it's kind of like a blog, but it's literally just about like the little magical sorcery, the little wizardly operations that we recently have done within the last couple of years. This is the water of the art, the wand, the coin, the sword, the vessel. Speaking of vessels of the art, I have my trusty vessel of the art right here. You could find it on the storefront at Abracast.com. And this one is filled with the legendary formula for weapon of mass distraction, the Jinn Jihad. So let's get this party started right, and then we'll jump into this. This is one of the ones I've been waiting for, bro. So I'm amped. All right, we're going to kind of get caught up here. Exodus 32:1. The sin of the people, the golden calf. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come and make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." And Aaron answered them and he said, "Take off your gold earrings and shit from your daughters and your wives and your sons that they're wearing and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron, and he took what they handed to him and they made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf and fashioning it with a tool. And then they said, "These are your gods, O Israel. I brought you up out of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." So the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. And afterwards they sat down to eat and to drink, and they got up to indulge in revelry. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people whom you've brought up out of Egypt have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them. They have made themselves an idol and cast it in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it, and have said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.' I have seen these people," the Lord said to Moses, "and they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them. And then I will make you into a great nation." So here we see God's doing his jealous God bit, and some of the things that we've talked about up until this point that are probably cogent would be the idea that there's weird sex stuff involved in this calf worshipping cult, this new, or I should say this old religion. And the reason I say that, not only because the Bible just says they started to indulge in some revelry, and last episode I talked about some of the footnotes and whatnot involving that and what that means, if it's not obvious. But also because just like a week or so prior to that, they basically witnessed a countenance of God on top of Mount Sinai with like thunderbolts and trumpets and fucking angels running around singing songs, and they watched Moses get beamed up. They watched him get translated into heaven. Even if they didn't see the translation of Moses into heaven, they know that he's up there, and there's like laser beams and shit going off, and they heard the voice of God, and 40 days or 30 days or 70 days, whatever it is later, they're like, you know what? Screw all that. I need to get my dick sucked or whatever's going on. And the other thing about the weird sex stuff is the connection that the golden calf has to Moloch. And Moloch, we will see in Leviticus, is this god idol thing that has like these little ovens built into it, and that's where they would slide the babies to get burned alive in these little idol ovens. This idol oven, you can check out. There's a pretty new shirt on Abracast.com, the t-shirt store, of this Moloch statue. It's pretty heavy metal. It's a pretty heavy metal shirt. Anyhow, and that just leads to like the idea of there's no consequences to these actions. The sins that God has just been laboriously laying out, like, don't go fucking with your neighbor's wife. Don't want what he has. Because fear leads to anger, and anger leads to suffering. There's no consequences for these on the surface level. There's no consequences because you could just feed, these illegitimate babies or whatever to this oven, this idol oven of Moloch. And then the last thing is the Procession of Ages, this astrotheological concept that we've talked about probably a bunch of times on this show. It just has to do with the how the zodiac sign moves through the sky every 2,500 years, and how not just the Bible, but a bunch of religious stories and mythological stories are tied to it. When I try to explain it, I would first say, well, go check out my book, The Ages. I mean, it's a comic book, but that's how the chronology is organized, is through this procession of this age and these ages through astrotheological symbolism. But in this age, the age of Moses would be Aries, and the backslide into this older religion of this calf would be associated with Taurus, the bull, which is also Moloch is associated with the bull as well. So that would be the age that preceded the age of Aries. So there's always this thing about going backwards. And also, like Jesus uses it in the Gospels where he says, go to the next town and find the dude with the water pitcher. What he's saying is the stories of Jesus would be under the sign of Pisces, and Jesus is saying, go look for Aquarius, the water bearer, which would be the next the next age, and would be the age that we're living in now. God, I had just a lot of babbling already. Hold on. All right. So let's get into this. I need a bookmark. I need my readers. When Moses, this is Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews. When Moses descended from Sinai, he found his true servant Joshua, who had awaited him on the slope of the mountain throughout all the 40 days which Moses stayed in heaven, and together they repaired to the encampment. On approaching it, they heard cries of the people, and Joshua remarked to Moses, "There is a noise of war in the camp." But Moses replied, "It is possible that thou, Joshua, who art one day destined to be the leader of 60 myriads of people, canst not distinguish among the different kinds of dins. This is no cry of Israel conquering, nor of their defeated foe. This is an adoration of an idol." When Moses had now come close enough to the camp to see what was going on there, he thought to himself, how now shall I give them these tables and enjoin them upon the prohibition of idolatry? For they are trespassing the very which. Heaven will inflict capital punishment on them. Hence, instead of delivering them the tables, he turned back, and the 70 elders pursued him and tried to wrest the tables from Moses, but his strength excelled that of the 70 others, and he kept the tables in his hands, although they were 70 saya in weight. All at once, however, he saw the writings vanish from the tables, and at the same time he became aware of their enormous weight. For while the celestial writing was upon them, they carried their own weight and did not burden Moses. But with the disappearance of the writing, all this changes. Now, all the more did Moses feel loath to give the tables without the contents to Israel. And besides, he thought, if God prohibited one idolatrous Israelite from partaking of the Passover feast, how much more would he be angry if I were now to give all the Torah to an idolatrous people? Hence, without consulting, he broke the tables. God, however, thanked Moses for breaking these tables. Hardly had Moses broken the tables when the ocean wanted to leave its bed to flood the world. And now Moses took the calf which they had made, and he burnt it in the fire and ground it into powder and strewn it upon the water, saying to the waters, What would ye upon the dry land? And the water said, The world stands only through observance of the Torah. But Israel had not been faithful to it, and Moses hereupon said to the water, All that have committed idolatry shall be yours. Are you now satisfied with these thousands? But the waters were not to be appeased by the sinners that Moses cast into them. And the ocean would not retreat to its bed until Moses made the children of Israel drink it. The drinking of these waters was one of the forms of capital punishment that he inflicted upon the sinners when, in answer to Moses' call, Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him, they who had not taken part in the adoration of the golden calf. Moses appointed these Levites as judges, who whose immediate duty was to inflict the lawful punishment of decapitation on all those who had been seen by witnesses to be seduced by idolatry. After they had been warned not to do so, Moses gave the command as though he had been commissioned to do so by God. This was not actually so, but he did it in order to enable the judges appointed by him to punish all the guilty in the course of one day, which otherwise, owing to the procedure of Jewish jurisprudence, could not well have been possible, for those, according to the testimony of witnesses, had been seduced by idolatry, but who could not be proven to have been warned beforehand, were not punished by the temporal justice. They died of the waters that Moses forced them to drink, for this water had upon them the same effect as the curse bringing water upon the idolatrous woman. But those sinners too, against whom no witness appeared, did not escape their fate, for upon them God sent the plague to carry them off. So this is a little bit different than my understanding of the Bible story of this. Here we can see that Moses is kind of like dealing with the ocean or the sea. The sea is really mad and wants to flood, so I guess it's stretched out over the desert or something and is threatening to flood the encampment. The way that I've read this as just the Bible story is that, well, here, let's see. 32, Exodus 32:19. When Moses approached the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing, and his anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. And he took the calf that they had made and burned it in the fire, and then he ground it to powder and scattered it on the water and made the Israelites drink it. So the way that I always understood this was that he ground up the tablets and the calf statue, and he actually just put it in water and made them drink the gravel and the ashes, not scattered it upon the waters of the ocean. Being that they're wandering around in the wilderness next to Mount Sinai, I don't know if there's a ocean right there. So the way that the Legends deals with it is that I guess the ocean, it's like the Super Friends. Jana and Jason and the Gleek, the space monkey, form of a tidal wave. And she turned into a tidal wave and creeped across the ocean and threatened the encampment. And then Moses made the idolaters drink the tidal wave. I don't know. I'll drink to that. All right, and then here we go. Moses is going to intercede for the people. Those who were executed by these judgments numbered 3,000. So that Moses said to God, O Lord of the world, just and merciful art thou, and all thy deeds are deeds of integrity. Shall 600,000 people, not to mention all those are below 20 years of age. Oh, so they can age out. Or age in. And all of those many proselytes and slaves perish for the sake of the 3,000 sinners. God could no longer withhold his mercy and determined to forgive Israel of their sins. It was only after long and fervent prayer that Moses succeeded in quite propitiating God, and hardly he had returned from heaven when he again repaired thither to advance before God his intercession for Israel, and he was ready to sacrifice himself for the sake of Israel. And as soon as punishments had been visited on the sinners, he turned to God with words, O Lord of the world, I have now destroyed both the golden calf and its idolaters. what cause for ill feeling against Israel can now remain? The sins these committed came to pass because thou hadst heaped gold and silver upon them, so that the blames of the blame is not wholly theirs. Yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book which thou hast written. So there's a couple things that here that I want to mention. For the last 2 episodes, we've been talking about Moses as like he's called the lawgiver, right? But he's actually acts as a lawyer in some of these situations. We've seen him do like lawyer kind of debating or logic debating or advocating or whatever. So this is one of those other bits. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about that I just picked up here was that one of his defenses was, look, you let us bring all this gold. You know, they kind of ransacked Egypt on their way out. I don't want to say steal, heavens forbid I say stealing, but, you know, they accepted gifts of like this gold and silver and precious gems from the Egyptians as they were bouncing, as they were getting out of Dodge. So it's interesting. They're like, look, you had us loot this fucking place. That's where all this gold came from. You know, meanwhile, they could have just built the calf out of rocks or something and just prayed to that, I guess, as long as there was an altar. I don't know. It's just an interesting parsing. I always find these legends interesting, like the hoops that they put in place to make these actions seem righteous or something, or to let the Jews kind of off the hook for stuff. Like in the last episode, they did a lot of talking about, oh, well, this is just the people that came with us. These idolaters were not the Jews. However, they all went to Aaron for the blessing and the making of the calf and all this stuff. So it's always just interesting. I love it. Well, I'm sorry, back to it. These bold words of Moses were not without consequences for him, for although God thereupon replied, whosoever hath sinned against me, I will blot out of my blood. Still, it was on account of this that his name was omitted from one section of the Pentateuch. I don't know what that means, but for Israel, his words created an instant revulsion of feeling in God, who now addressed him kindly and promised that he would send his angels who would lead the people into the promised land. Can I get an amen? These words indicated to Moses that God was not yet entirely appeased, and he could further see in this punishment that fell upon Israel on this day, their weapons, which every man among them had received at the revelation on Sinai, on which had miraculous of virtues, having the names of God engraved upon them, were taken by the angels in their robes of purple likewise. When Moses saw from this that God's wrath was still upon Israel, and that he desired to have nothing further to do with them, that he removed his tent a mile away from their camp, saying to himself, the disciple may not have intercourse with people whom the master has excommunicated. It's all about the earth chicks, bro. So this is another interesting bit, that upon the revelation on Mount Sinai, these miraculous virtues, these swords and these weapons adopted miraculous virtues, and they had the name of God engraved upon them. That is super interesting. I want to look at Exodus and see if I can find anything correlating to that. Like I said, Exodus 32:27, and he said to them, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, each man strap a sword to his side and go back and forth through the camp from one end of the other other, each killing his brother and his friends and neighbor. That's what the Levites did. Okay. Okay, 32:13. The Lord replied to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book, not out of my blood." That's an interesting edit, right? In the myths, he said, "I will blot out of my blood," which doesn't make much sense. I don't think God has much blood. I mean, I guess if he wills it, he can have as much as he wants. But here, he said, "I will blot out of my book," which makes a little bit more sense. "Now go and lead the people out of the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sins." And the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what they did with that calf that Aaron had made. Uh, 33:2, it talks about the land of milk and honey, which is just the promised land. Stiff-necked people. When the people heard these distressing words, they began to mourn. "I might destroy you and take your ornaments." He stripped them of their ornaments. Okay, so this might be it. In the myths, it was magical swords and spears, magical weapons with the name of the Lord inscribed upon them to avail them in miraculous virtues. But here, Exodus 33:4-5, the 33:5, the Lord had said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, you are a stiff-necked people. If I were to go with you even for a moment, I might destroy you. Now take off your ornaments and I will decide what to do with you." So the Israelites stripped of their ornaments at Mount Horeb. Now Moses used the tent and pitched it outside the camp some distance away, a mile away maybe, calling the tent of meeting. Anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to the tent meeting outside. Okay, so the Bible, it has none of the magic swords, but it does have ornaments. That's what I'm going to decree right here on my personal Mount Sinai. And the revelation of the word of the Lord in the book of Acts 32:3, it says, "Drink the tidal wave," and finish this episode. All right. Enough fooling around. Back to it. "These bold words of Moses were not without consequence for him, for although God thereupon replied, 'Whoever hath sinned against me, him,'" here he says it again, "him will I blot out of my blood." I believe it should be book. This is what this is what happens with oral traditions. It's a game of telephone across the Hebrew the Israeli ages. Still, it was on the account of this and what his name was omitted from one section of the Pentateuch. Hold on, I fucked up. I bookmarked the wrong paragraph here. Okay, now back to it. "Not only the people went out of his tent whenever they sought the Lord, but the angels also, the seraphim," which we've spoken about, "the heavenly host repaired thither, the sun and the moon and the other heavenly bodies, all of whom knew that God was to be found there." The tent that Moses was the spot where they were to appear before their Creator. God, however, was not at all pleased to see Moses keep himself aloof from the people. And he said to him, "According to our agreement, I was to appropriate thee every time thou weren't angry with the people, and thou wert to appropriate me when my wrath was kindled against them. Now, what is now to become of these poor people, if we be both angry with them? Return therefore to the camp to these people. But if thou wilt not obey, remember that Joshua is at camp at the sanctuary, and he can well fill thy place. Oh, he's threatening Moses with a demotion, or worse. Moses replied, "It is for thy sake that I am angry with them, and now I see that still thou canst not forsake them. I have," said God, "already told thee that I shall send an angel before them." But Moses, by no means content with this assurance, continued to importune God not to entrust Israel to an angel, but to conduct and guide them in person. 40 days and 40 nights from the 18th day of Tammuz to the 28th day of Ab did Moses stay in heaven, beseeching and imploring God to restore Israel once more entirely to his favor. But all his prayers and all his exhortations were in vain, until at the end of the 40 days he implored God to set the pious deeds of the patriarchs and of the 12 sons of Jacob to account of their descendants. And only when his prayers were answered, he said, "If thou art angry with Israel because they transgressed the 10 commandments, be mindful for the sake of the 10 tests to which thou didst subject Abraham, and through which he nobly passed. If Israel deserves at thy hands punishment by fire, and for their sins remember the fire of the lime kiln into which Abraham let himself be cast for the glory of thy name. If Israel deserves death by the sword, remember the readiness with which Isaac laid down his neck upon the altar to be sacrificed to thee. If they deserved punishment by exile, remember for their sake at how their father Jacob wandered into exile from his paternal home in Haran. Moses furthermore said to God, "Will the dead ever be restored to life?" And God in surprise retorted, "Hast thou become a heretic, Moses? Thou dost doubt the resurrection? If," said Moses, "the dead never awaken to life, then truly thou art right to wreak vengeance upon Israel. But if the dead are to be restored to life hereafter, what wilt thou say to the fathers of this nation if they ask thee, what has become of the promise thou hast made to them? I demand nothing more for Israel," Moses continued, "than what thou were willing to grant Abraham when he pleaded for Sodom. What were willing to let Sodom survive if there was just 10 just men therein. And I am about to enumerate to the 10 just men, the Israelites, myself, Aaron, Eleazar, Ithamar, Phinehas, Joshua, and Caleb. But that is only 7, objected God. And Moses, not all abashed, replied, "But thou hast said that the dead will hereafter be restored to life. So count with these the 3 patriarchs to make the number 10 complete." And Moses's mention of the names of the 3 patriarchs was more avail than anything else, and God granted his prayer, and he forgave Israel of their transgressions, and he promised to lead them in person. So here we go. This is Moses once again being Ally McBeal. Moses, attorney at law. The inscrutable ways of the Lord. Moses still cherished the other wishes, that the Shekinah might dwell with Israel, that the Shekinah might not dwell with other nations, and lastly, that he might learn to know the ways of the Lord, whereby he ordained good or evil in the world, sometimes causing suffering to the just and letting the unjust enjoy happiness, whereas the other times both were happy or both were destined to suffer. So, this Shekinah, according to my basic understanding, is like a version of the Holy Ghost, but she's a hot chick. The hot babe version of the Holy Ghost is the Shekinah. Moses laid these wishes before God in the moment of his wrath, and hence God bade Moses to wait until the wrath should have blown over. And then he granted him the first two wishes in full, but his third, in part only, God showed him the great treasure troves in which are stored up the various rewards for the pious and the just, explaining each separated one to him in detail. And this one, where the rewards of those who give alms, in that one of those who bring up orphans. In this way, he showed the destination of each one of these treasures until at length they came to one gigantic size. For whom is the treasure? Asked Moses. And God answered, out of the treasure that I have shown thee, I give rewards to those who have deserved them by their deeds. But out of this treasure do I give of those who are not deserving, for I am gracious to those also who may lay no claim to my graciousness, and I am bountiful to those who are not deserving of my bounty. Moses now had to content himself with the certainty that the pious were sure of their deserts, without, however, learning from God how it sometimes comes to pass that evildoers too are happy. For God merely stated that he also shows himself kind to those who do not deserve it, but without further assigning the whys and the wherefores. But the reward to the pious too was only in part revealed to him, for he beheld the joys of paradise of which they were to partake, but not the real reward that was to follow, the feast in paradise. For truly eye hath not seen besides the Lord what he hath prepared for him that waiteth for him. By means of the following incident, God shows Moses how little man is able to fathom the inscrutable ways of the Lord. When Moses was on Sinai, he saw from that station a man who betook himself to a river, and he stooped down to drink, and he lost his posture, and without noticing it, went on his way. Shortly after, another man came and found the money, pocketed it, and took to his heels. When the owner of the purse became aware of his loss, he returned to the river, where he did not find his money, but he saw a man who came there by chance to fetch water. And he came and he said, "Restore to me the money that a little while ago I left here, for none can have taken it if not thou." And when the man declared that he had found none of the money or seen any of it, the owner slew him. Looking with horror and amazement on the injustice on earth, Moses said to God, "I beseech thee, show me thy ways. Why hath this man who was quite innocent been slain? And why hath the true thief gone unpunished?" And God replied, "The man who found the money and kept it merely recovered his own possessions, for he who had lost the purse by the river had formerly stolen it from him." The one who seemed to be innocently slain is only making atonement for having at one time murdered the father of his slayer. Oh boy. In this way, God granted the request of Moses to show him his ways, in part only if show to show him his ways in part only. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. He let him look into the future. This is the Lord, the God of time, and he let him see every generation and its sages, and every generation and its prophets, and every generation and its expounders of the scriptures, and every generation and its leaders, and every generation and its pious men. But when Moses said, "O Lord of the world, let me see by what law thou dost govern the world, for I see that many a just man is lucky, but many a one is not. Many a wicked man is lucky, and many a one is not. Many a rich man is happy, many a one is not. Many a poor man is happy, and many a one is not." And God answered, "Thou canst not grasp all the principles which I apply to the government of the world. But some of them I shall impart to thee. When I see a human being who have no claim to expectations from me, either for thine own deeds or for those of their fathers, but who pray to me and implore me, then do I grant their prayers and give them what they require from substance." Although God had now granted all of his wishes, still Moses received the following answer to his prayer: "I beseech thee, show me thy glory. Thou mayest not behold my glory. Or ever thou wouldst perish, and consider of my vow to grant thee all thy wishes in the view of the fact that thou art in possession of the secret of my name, the Tetragrammaton. I will meet thee so far as to satisfy thou desire in part. Lift the opening of the cave, and I will bid all the angels that serve me to pass in review before thee. But as soon as thou hearest the name which I have revealed to thee, know then that I am there, and I bear thyself bravely without fear. God has a reason for not showing his glory to Moses, and he said to him, when I reveal myself to thee in the burning bush, thou did not want to look upon me. Now thou art willing, but I am not. All right, so what follows is like one of those things. Like if you're talking religion with somebody, or you're talking Old Testament, say you're drunk, say you had a few drinks, you're at a really, I don't know, I guess most people would think this is a boring party if you're sitting around talking about theology, whatever. Anyhow, if you start telling people, look, Moses saw God's butt. God let Moses check his butt out. This is not, I don't think it's common knowledge, but this is this part of the story. And I'm glad we're going to be ending on this, because it's just one of those things where you're like, yeah, you know, Moses saw God's butt. He saw God's butt. And you're like, what are you even talking about, bro? What do you mean? In fact, it's so favorite of a factoid of mine. It's part of that is actually in, or I should say a reference to this is actually in my book, The Ages. It's like page 1. You see God's butt, and it is a real text heavy page. So I rearranged all the editorial blocks literally almost awkwardly to get the butt in view and not covered up with the with the editorial boxes. Anyhow, here's the story of God's ass. Exodus 33:17. And the Lord says to Moses, I will do the very thing that you have asked, because I am pleased with you, and I know you by name. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all of my goodness to pass in front of you, but I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But, he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see my face and live. And then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock, and when my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. And then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. So this seems like a really good place to say good evening. See you next week. Dr. John Towers signing off.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books at Abracast.com. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes, more bonus audio, additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Find the link to the Red Archive at Abracast.com.